He really hated Audie Murphy. Now we know the reason why James Cagney was born. James Francis Cagney, JRB, on July 17, 1899 in New York City. Growing up on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, Cagney came from a working-class Irish-American family and knew hard times early in life. His father worked different jobs, including being a bartender, while his mother raised 7 children in their small apartment. From when he was young, James learned to be strong, smart with what he had, and driven to succeed. Quality as that would shape both who he was as a person and his work life. He went to Stuyvesant High School and later studied at Columbia College, off Columbia University for a little while, but school wasn't what would call him. Instead, he was drawn toward performing arts almost by luck. At first interested in art and dance, he soon discovered his love for making people happy. First by working as a dancer in vaudeville shows and later trying his hand at acting on the stage. Cagney's start in Hollywood was slow but steady. In the late 1920s and early 1930s, as silent movies were changing to talking movies, he made his way from Broadway to Warner Brothers Studios. What made Cagney stand out was his exciting energy on screen. At a time when many actors had trouble changing their style for sound films, he brought a quick, fast-talking, street-smart personality that audiences loved. His big break came in The Public Enemy, 1931, in which he played Tom Powers, a mean gangster. The film not only made him a star, but also made his image as the perfective guy. One unforgettable moment, Cagney smashing a grapefruit into Mick Clarke's face, became one of the most famous scenes in movie history, showing both his violent characters and his brave approach to acting. But behind this character, Cagney himself was nothing like the gangsters he played. Friends and co-workers often said he was a nice, hard-working, and family-loving man who lived quietly when not on camera. Throughout the 1930s and 1942, Cagney ruled the big screen, not only in gangster roles, but also in many different characters that showed his range. He could show intensity in films like Angels with Dirty Faces, 1938, where he played a criminal whose death becomes a powerful lesson for young boys. Or he could turn around and play funny roles just as well. His talent reached its highest point in Yankee Doodle Dandy 1942, where he played entertainer George M. Cohan. This role gave him the chance to show off his singing and dancing skills, proving that he was not just a tough guy, but also a natural entertainer. His performance won him the Academy Award for Best Actor, one of the highest awards in Hollywood, and remains one of his most celebrated achievements. Cagney stopped acting in the early 1960s, but was talked into coming back for a few films in the 1980s, including Ragtime, 1981, which became his final movie appearance. By then, he had already earned the respect of many generations of actors, directors, and audiences. In 1974, the American Film Institute ranked him as the 8th greatest male screen legend of classic Hollywood movies, a well-deserved recognition of his contributions. In 1920, James Cagney's career was still in its very early stages, and he was simply another struggling performer in New York trying to make it on the stage. That year he got a job as a chorus member in the musical revue Pitter Patter, though this was hardly the kind of role that would make him a star. It turned out to be one of the most important moments of his life because it was during this show that he met Frances Willard, Billy Vernon, a fellow performer. The two quickly formed a deep connection that went beyond the stage lights, finding in each other a sense of friendship, stability, and understanding. Their romance grew, and on September 28, 1922, James Cagney and Frances Vernon married. Amazingly, their marriage became one of the longest-lasting marriages in Hollywood history, lasting over 60 years until Cagney's death in 1986, a rare thing in an industry often filled with scandal and short-lived relationships. Frances, who became known as Willie Cagney, lived longer than her husband by several years and passed away in 1994, showing the strength and loyalty that had been part of their relationship. Although Cagney and his wife did not have biological children, they chose to grow their family through adoption. In 1940, they welcomed their first child, as in whom they named James Francis Cagney. Later, they adopted a daughter, Kathleen Casey Cagney. Both children brought new meaning to Cagney's personal life, giving him a private role as a father to balance against the intense public demands of his film career. Despite his fame, James Cagney always valued privacy and family above the glitz of Hollywood. Unlike many of his peers who wanted publicity and looked for constant media attention, Cagney was known as a veriprivate man. He would sometimes allow press to take photographs, often posing nicely with his wife or children when needed, but carefully protected the boundaries of his personal life. Away from the cameras, he wanted a quiet life, going back to his farm in New York and later to his property in Dutchess County, where he could enjoy painting, horseback riding, and nature without anyone bothering him. Sadly, not all parts of Cagney's family life were peaceful. His only son, James Cagney III, died suddenly of a heart attack on January 27, 1984 in Washington, D.C., just 2 years before his father's own death. This was an especially painful loss to the actor, not only because of the death itself, but also because he and his son had become distant in the years leading up to James II's passing. Their distance had started around 1982, and Father Anson never made up before his death, leaving a hurt in Cagney's personality that was never healed. The strain in their relationship was a sharp contrast to the public image of Cagney as a devoted family man, showing the private struggles that even famous figures go through. Unfortunately, the tension within the family went beyond his son. Cagney's daughter, Kathleen Casey Cagney, also became distant from him during the latter years of his life, though details of their disagreements were kept mostly private, matching Cagney's lifelong habit to keep his personality away from public attention. It was known that father and daughter drifted apart during his final years. Despite their distance, Kathleen lived on for many years after her father's death, passing away on August 11, 2004. Her death marked the ending of yet another chapter in the Cagney family story, one that showed both the warmth and the difficulties of family life lived in the shadow of fame. James Cagney, one of Hollywood's most famous and talented actors, was known for his exciting performances, his unmistakable and presence, and his ability to bring raw intensity to any role he played. Audiences loved him for classics such as The Public Enemy, Yankee Doodle Dandy, and many others. But behind the polished image of the legendary star, there was a man who was outspoken, deeply believed in his values, and wasn't afraid of sharing his true feelings with co-workers in the film industry. While Cagney admired many actors, he did not hold back from openly criticizing others. And one name that came up in his private conversations was that of Audie Murphy. Audie Murphy, on the other hand, had a story that was almost legendary. A decorated World War II hero, Murphy was awarded the Medal of Honor and became America's most decorated soldier before moving into Hollywood. Movie studio bosses quickly realized that Murphy's reputation as a national hero could turn into box office success, and they gave him opportunities in westerns and war films. Audiences respected him, but his acting ability often got mixed reviews. Critics sometimes said Murphy was stiff and relying on his workload rather than real talent. Cagney, who took pride in his craft and the art of performing, supposedly grew annoyed by the way Hollywood lifted Murphy up without holding him to the same standards as classically trained or naturally gifted actors. "The man's a hero, no doubt about that," Cagney said, "but being brave on the battlefield doesn't make you a master off stage or screen." To Cagney, there was a sacred line between the art of acting and the celebrity culture that tried to blur the lines. He hated the idea of studios building up a war around presenting him as an actor equal to experienced performers who had trained their entire lives. In private, Cagney's words about Murphy were harsher. He was reported to have said, "Audie Murphy could barely deliver a line without it sounding rehearsed. A soldier may win medals, but an actor must win over an audience with truth. And truth isn't in a uniform, it's in the soul." This held the root of Cagney's frustration. He felt that Murphy's career represented Hollywood's growing reliance on publicity tricks and the use of fame rather than a true dedication to art. It wasn't spurnal hate toward Murphy as Amen. Cagney, from what everyone said, respected his service to the country, but it wasted professional principle that upset him. In fact, Cagney often acknowledged Murphy's bravery, even going so far as to say, "I'll never match what he did in Europe. No one could." But let's not pretend heroism translates to artistry. That's not fair to the craft, and it's not fair to him either. This difference in viewpoint put Cagney in direct opposition to Hollywood executives who pushed Murphy as a marketable star. Studios were often more concerned with profit than artistic quality, and Cagney felt that promoting Murphy as a leading man cheapened the profession he had worked so hard to lift up. When you put a man in front of the camera because of his medals instead of his skill, Cagney once joked, "You insult audiences." Intelligence, the tension between admiration for Murphy's military heroics and dislike for his acting ability created an unusual puzzle in Cagney's comments. He hated what Murphy's Hollywood career represented, not necessarily the man himself. Still, in a town where publicimage was everything, those harsh words carried weight. Fans of Murphy saw him as a symbol of American courage, while Cagney represented a more traditional view of cinema as an art form requiring discipline, depth, and emotional honesty. In the end, Cagney's outspoken opinions on Audie Murphy became a reflection of his bigger philosophy about Hollywood. He wanted acting to be respected as a serious craft, not turned into a marketing trick. For him, Murphy was the symbol of theatric. And though Cagney himself remained beloved until his death in 1986, he left behind a legacy not only of great films, but also of honesty, unafraid to say exactly what he thought, even if it meant challenging the popularity of a war hero turned actor. For many, Cagney's words offer a window into the never-ending debate in Hollywood. Should fame and image decide success, or should the art itself be the deciding factor? His dislike for Audie Murphy was less about personal hatred and more about defending the purity of acting. Yet the passion in his remarks leaves little doubt when it came to the world of film. James Cagney had no tolerance for what he saw as fakes. James Cagney's final years were spent in quiet countryside, far away from the bright lights of Hollywood that hadn't defined much of his life. He passed away on Easter Sunday, March 30th, 1986 at the age of 86 on his beloved Dutchess County farm in Stanfordville, New York. This farm, which he had bought years earlier, was more than just a home. It was his safe place. Cagney loved the peacefulness of the rural landscape where he could live shurned by nature, take care of the land, and enjoy his lifelong love for art, painting, and the simpler pleasures of country life. It was on this very property that he took his final breath, dying from a heart attack. The timing of his death happening on Easter Sunday carried a symbolic weight for many, as the holiday is deeply tied to themes of coming back to life and eternal life, offering a meaningful reflect on the passing of a man who had become immortal through his work on screen. His death marked the end of an era. For decades, Cagney had been one of the most famous and respected actors in American cinema, known for his fiery energy, commanding screen presence, and ability to shift easily between gangster roles and light-hearted musicals. Fans across the country mourned the loss of a legend whose career had shaped the golden age of Hollywood. Newspapers carried headlines and tributes recalling his greatest performance from The Public Enemy to Yankee Doodle Dandy and recognizing how he had left a permanent mark on film history. For many, the news was especially striking because Cagney had lived such a long and full life, beating the odds of a career that had often been raw and demanding. Following his death, a solemn funeral mass was arranged to honor him. The service took place at St. Francis Sales Roman Catholic Church located 196th Street in Manhattan. A fitting choice given Cagney's lifelong Catholic faith, though Cagney had always been a private man, avoiding the excesses of Hollywood and the constant gaze of the press. His funeral brought together a remarkable mix of people, family, friends, co-workers from the film industry, and fans who wanted to pay their final respects. The church, with its quiet dignity, became the gathering place where people celebrated not only his career but also his integrity, his devotion to his wife Frances, and his generosity to those he cared for. The funeral mass was filled with both sadness and thankfulness. Church members emphasized his Irish Catholic heritage and his dedication to values that went beyond fame. Attendees thought about this remarkable life journey from a boy growing up in the tough neighborhoods of New York City's Lower East Side to one of the most acclaimed actors of the 20th century. The prayers, hymns, and speeches carried a sense of respect, acknowledging that Cagney was not just a movie star, but also a husband, father, and generous person who had touched lives beyond the silver screen.